Brianna Walker stood in front of the towering glass facade of Davenport Global Capital, a cold monument to power and expectation. The steel walls mirrored her reflection, plus-sized, black, wearing a navy knee-length skirt and an ivory button-up blouse fastened to the collar. Her natural curls were pulled back into a low bun. No makeup, but her eyes gleamed as if she carried a silent verdict meant for the world. She adjusted the strap of her leather bag, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Her steps were slow, but steady like steel. The lobby smelled faintly of orchids. The granite floors were polished to a mirror finish, reflecting every heartbeat. A group of suited employees rushed past, clinging to their laptops like Shield's motion blur in human form. None of them bothering to look, but the receptionists looked. Specifically, they looked at her body. Two white women in crisp black uniforms glanced up from their screens, exchanged a brief smirk. One smirked. The other nudged her and said, "Excuse me, are you catering?" Brianna kept her voice calm. "I have a 9:30 interview with the HR department. My name is Brianna Walker." One receptionist frowned, scanning her from head to toe meticulously. No company badge, no visible internal ID. Then, she tilted her chin. "Are you sure you're in the right building? Maintenance staff is on B2. And HR, or should I say, hair and makeup is on the 31st floor." The words came out like a dull blade, but they still cut deep. Brianna didn't argue. She simply pulled out her phone and showed the interview confirmation email. Not with defiance, just the quiet grace of someone used to proving they deserve to exist. A minute later, she was sent to the candidate waiting area. 31st floor, recruitment lounge. The room glowed with white light and polished walnut wood, real leather chairs, designer mineral water bottles on display. But none of it was meant for Brianna. A white blonde woman in a tailored Hugo Boss suit was adjusting her hair in the mirror. When Brianna walked in, she glanced up, paused, then turned to the assistant. "Let me know when the real candidate arrives. I'm not here to be entertained." The assistant chuckled. "Don't worry, ma'am. You're still our most qualified applicant." Brianna heard everything, but she said nothing. She walked to the last chair by the window, the one no one wanted sat up straight, pulled out a folder, and began reviewing her own 22-page analysis on Davenport Global's internal culture. The same document she had stayed up until 2 a.m. preparing. At 9:35, a door opened. A thin woman with straightened hair and icy eyes, Stephanie Harlan, stepped out. Her gaze scanned the room like a security scanner. When her eyes landed on Brianna, she froze for half a second and asked Miss Walker, "Yes." Stephanie gave a curt nod, reluctant, then turned around without a smile, without an invitation. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant, the glass table cold to the touch. No one here cared whether you felt welcome. Stephanie took her seat. Beside her were two white men, Travis Young, operations director, and Mark Jensen, head of training. All three wore expensive watches and forced smiles. From the first question, Brianna understood this wasn't an interview. It was a power play. "You worked at Evacor Solutions?" Travis asked, like he'd just spotted a wrinkle on a silk shirt. "Yes. I led a redesign of the onboarding process and helped reduce first 90-day turnover from 64% to 21%. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Sounds interesting. I suppose the culture there was more accommodating of different body types." Stephanie chuckled, no attempt to hide it. "Actually," Brianna replied, "we measured performance by data, not waistlines or personal taste." The room fell quiet, until Travis turned to Stephanie and quipped, "Did you call maintenance? I think these chairs need upgrading. One of them's about to give out." Stephanie gasped in mock alarm. "Oh, right. Must be the weight limit." She looked at Brianna. half joking, half sneering. "We're still updating our inclusive hiring policy. Expanding the standards takes time." Brianna knew. Oh, she knew. She wasn't getting the job. She had been invited so they could check the interviewed a minority candidate box on their diversity report. But instead of reacting, she calmly pulled out a folder and placed it gently on the table. "This is a 22-page analysis on belonging versus fitting in multinational financial firms. It includes 3 graphs specific to Davenport Global. It might help if you're actually serious about change and not just putting on a show." Then she stood, quietly. No thank you. No goodbye. Just her gaze steady and bright, as if speaking to the whole room. "I didn't come here to be chosen. I came to make sure you saw me, even if just once in your life." Brianna hadn't even made it out of the long gray carpeted hallway when the interview room door swung open again. Miss Walker Stephanie's voice called after her. It wasn't a change of heart. It was something else entirely. The performance wasn't over yet. Brianna turned back. "Yes, we'd like to invite you back in." "There's a second part to the evaluation," Stephanie said, as if offering a golden opportunity. But Brianna could hear it in her tone, something staged, something false, not professionalism. A setup. She hesitated for a beat, then walked back in. The door clicked shut behind her with a dry snap, like a warning shot. Same room, same people. But something had shifted. No more questions, no more resumes. Stephanie stood near the large wooden cabinet in the corner. Travis lounged back in his chair, hands behind his head, watching her like a test subject. Mark was dragging a plastic office chair into the middle of the room. "Please have a seat," Stephanie said gently. Too gently. Brianna approached, then stopped cold. The chair wasn't a proper office chair. It was a flimsy, white plastic kitchen chair, the kind you find at flea markets or food courts. Not something you'd expect in a $1 million company. "Our regular chairs are out for safety inspection," Stephanie offered, avoiding eye contact. "Just protocol," Travis added, stifling a grin. "As long as you're comfortable." Brianna knew exactly what this was, and exactly what they wanted to happen. This wasn't about qualifications. This was about breaking her both literally and symbolically. She stepped forward, set her bag down, looked at the chair, then looked them each in the eye. "I'm fine standing." They blinked. Mark clicked his tongue, clicked his mod. "Miss Walker, this is part of our flexibility and compliance assessment. Candidates are expected to demonstrate adaptability. You want to test my adaptability." With a collapsing chair, Travis smirked. "We just want to see how you handle imperfect environments." Brianna paused. Then she sat. The chair creaked under her weight. Loudly, painfully. But it held. For a second. Travis raised an eyebrow. Mark pretended to take notes. Stephanie casually lifted her phone camera, pointed right at Brianna. And then crack. The chair snapped. Brianna hit the floor hard, knee slamming into the table's metal leg. Her bag flew open. Papers scattered across the room. Laughter. Not from observers, but from the interviewers. Stephanie giggled like she'd just watched a comedy skit. Travis clapped once, mocking. "Well, someone call maintenance. Looks like our infrastructure's collapsing." No one offered a hand. No one asked if she was okay. Brianna pushed herself up. Her skirt twisted sideways, her sleeve torn. Shock spread across her face, but no tears. She gathered her documents. One page at a time. No panic, no rage, no eye contact. Travis broke the silence. "Actually, we can end the interview here. You'll hear back from us in a few weeks." Brianna looked up at him. Didn't say a word. She stood from the cold tile floor and stacked her now creased documents neatly back in her folder. Only one sentence left her lips. "Thank you. for showing me the company's real culture." As she stepped outside the door, a middle-aged janitor passed by. He was the only one who looked at her with real eyes. Human eyes. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked softly. Brianna nodded, though her hands were trembling. "Don't believe what they say," he whispered. "They're just scared of people they can't control." She looked at him, gratitude in her eyes. Not for pity, but because someone saw her. The elevator doors closed behind her. For the first time in 30 minutes, Brianna exhaled, her heart still pounding, but her mind steady. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew this morning had stolen something from her, not her dignity. That they could never take, but her belief that talent could speak loud enough in a room full of bias. What she didn't know was that room was being recorded, video, audio, and it would soon become the very evidence that judged those who believed they were untouchable. Later that afternoon, Brianna sat alone at a small cafe across the street from the very building where she had just been humiliated. The coffee in front of her had long gone cold, untouched. Her hands still trembled, as if part of her body hadn't caught up with the rest, the part that had forced itself not to cry. She was scrolling through her application documents on her phone when a new email popped up from Linda Beecham, Chief Ethics Officer, Davenport Global Capital Subject Follow-Up Request Body. "Miss Walker, we apologize for this morning's inappropriate experience. I would like to invite you to attend a closed-door discussion at 3:30 today on the 35th floor. Room Elysian. Your presence would be appreciated. No explanation, no further details. Just a request, polite, but full of implication." Brianna read it 3 times. Hesitated, then slipped her phone into her bag and took a long, steady breath. She knew the name Linda Beecham, the only black woman on the company's senior leadership board, known for never bowing her head, but also not the type to send emails just to be civil. The conference room doors opened, revealing a space completely unlike the cold chamber she had faced that morning. This room was warm, quiet, and dignified. No glass tables, no plastic chairs, just a round oak table surrounded by 6 people. And every one of them looked up as Brianna entered. Linda was the first to rise. "Miss Walker, please, have a seat." The others included 3 members of the HR board, 1 internal legal advisor, and Travis Young. He wore the same white shirt and loose tie, but he wasn't leaning back anymore. His hands were clasped tightly. The look on his face no longer smug, just tense. "We're conducting an internal review of our hiring systems following several serious complaints over the past few months. This morning's interview," she continued, "was captured by our internal surveillance system as part of our recruitment ethics audit." The room held its breath. Brianna looked at Linda. Not surprised, just understanding. Linda went on, "But of all the candidates we tested under pressure, none had the clarity, composure, and conviction to stay, to face what happened, and to leave behind strategic documentation. Except you." Travis jumped in, too quickly. "With all due respect, I wouldn't classify what happened this morning as humiliation. It was merely a test of adaptability under pressure." Linda turned to him, her stare as sharp as a scalpel. "You mean collapsing a chair under a black woman in a glass boardroom, laughing, recording it, and using the word weight capacity was a test?" Travis fell silent. One of the board members leaned forward. "We'd like to hear from you directly. Miss Walker, in your words, how did you feel you were treated?" "I don't think they cared where I came from. They just wanted me gone. They didn't care about my degrees. They didn't even glance at the proposal I brought in. They just needed me to break." She paused, looked straight at Travis. "I'm not upset about being rejected. I've been turned down before. But this wasn't rejection. This was the erasure of someone's dignity because I didn't fit what they wanted to see. Silence fell like a weight over the table. Linda broke it. That's why I brought you here. She reached into a folder and placed a document in front of Brianna. You once wrote, "A company's hiring culture reveals the true structure of its power." I want you to present that to our executive board tomorrow morning. Brianna blinked, stunned. Not as an apology. Linda continued. But to prove you weren't here just to be interviewed. You were here to interview us. Brianna glanced down. It was her original proposal, still stained with a small coffee mark on the corner. But every chart, note, and recommendation had been highlighted, annotated in Linda's handwriting. She looked up, her voice shaky but firm. I never wanted to be chosen out of sympathy. I only ever wanted a chance to be heard. Linda nodded. And starting tomorrow, you won't just be heard. You'll be the one making the system speak. The next morning, 8:00 a.m., 42nd floor, Grand Boardroom, Davenport Global Capital. No one expected today to be different, on paper. It was just the usual Q2 strategic HR review. A routine meeting, boring and predictable, where department heads recited KPI reports and quietly exited. The room was already prepped fresh coffee, warm buttered pastries, soft overhead lights, and decades of complacency. Travis Young entered first, paler than usual, but still walking with his practiced posture. Stephanie Harlan arrived minutes later, beige pencil skirt, sleek hair, and an unreadable expression. Linda Beecham, Chief Ethics Officer, was already seated, with 3 senior board members. And at the far end of the table sat a black woman in a navy blazer, curls pinned low, no name tag, no formal introduction, just presence, and a gaze that slowly, silently pulled the air from the room. Today's meeting is not about performance metrics. It's about one question. Is our HR department ethically fit to manage human beings? A ripple of discomfort spread across the room. Stephanie frowned. Excuse me, this was scheduled as a KPI session, not an inquisition. Linda didn't answer. She simply gestured to the screen at the front of the table. A video began to play. No music, no cuts. Just raw footage from the surveillance camera in conference room 7 the day before. The screen showed Brianna entering, sitting down, the plastic chair groaning, Stephanie laughing, Travis clapping once. The words were having a structural collapse. And finally, Brianna falling to the floor. No one in the room laughed. One board member looked away. Another removed his glasses. Travis clenched his armrest. Stephanie's temples glistened with sweat. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but this, she gestured toward the frozen frame of Brianna on the floor. This is what those words really look like, when they mean nothing. Then she turned to Brianna, the only person at the table who had yet to speak. Miss Walker, you may begin. She didn't look at anyone, just the screen. No raised voice, no tremble. She clicked to the first slide. 3 charts appeared. Retention rates for minority employees over the past 3 years. Frequency of internal discrimination complaints. Leadership structure by race and gender, a sea of white, without a single shade of brown. She spoke clearly, slowly. I spent 6 weeks analyzing Davenport's HR culture, using over 120 data points from internal reports and anonymous employee surveys. My conclusion: this department isn't just lacking transparency, it's maintaining a silent filtration system where candidates are judged not by skill, but by how comfortable they make the white interviewer feel. She paused, looked directly at Travis. Yesterday, I wasn't asked about my leadership strategies. I wasn't asked about organizational planning. I was asked about my body weight. The silence that followed was almost audible. Even the wheels of the boardroom chairs seemed to hold still, A board member, Susan Lang, finally spoke. Miss Walker, how did you obtain this level of internal data? Brianna switched slides again. A small logo appeared in the corner, Empower Bridge Analytics. The same consultancy Davenport had once hired for its Asia-Pacific culture overhaul. Linda stepped in. She led that project under a confidentiality clause. We brought her back under anonymity to assess how this building handles ethics at the source. The room froze like a chapel after a gunshot. Wait a minute, this was a setup, a trap. Linda turned calmly to him. No. This was an interview. But this time, you were the ones being interviewed. Who her father was no longer mattered. Someone whispered, I heard her name's Walker. Any relation to Linda raised a hand. Her last name was omitted intentionally, because we wanted to see what would happen when you thought she had no one behind her. Brianna stepped forward, softly, but unshaken. I didn't need you to know who I am. I needed you to realize who you are when faced with someone you believed was nobody. 1 hour after the meeting, grand boardroom, still thick with the scent of cold coffee and tension that hadn't yet cleared. Stephanie Harlan no longer sat with her back straight. Her eyes avoided everyone's, especially Brianna's. Travis Young, still trying to keep his tone composed, was clearly unraveling. She manipulated the entire recruitment process. He repeated for the third time in 10 minutes. This isn't how a serious company operates. Linda Beecham didn't answer. She was rereading Brianna's culture audit, spinning her pen between her fingers, her gaze cutting through the wood grain of the table and into the soul of the man across from her. Then the doors opened. Every head turned. Gregory Davenport had arrived. Not with bluster, but with a cold, steady calm, like a storm cloud rolling in. He walked straight to the head of the table, didn't sit, didn't greet anyone, just swept the room with his eyes. When his gaze landed on Brianna, he nodded, but said nothing. No favoritism, no warmth, just recognition. Linda, he said, voice like iron wrapped in silence. Can you explain why I just received over 17 internal reports in the last 40 minutes? Linda stood without hesitation. Because, sir, you just witnessed what many in this company have quietly endured for years. Then she turned to Travis and Stephanie. You're not here today to give a report. You're here to be held accountable. Gregory didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to, Travis Young, he said. You are suspended effective immediately. A formal disciplinary investigation begins within 24 hours. Your system access is revoked as of now. Travis shot to his feet. I built this entire operational structure from day one, and precisely because of that. Gregory interrupted. You are the first to answer for what's rotted from the inside. He turned to Stephanie. Miss Harlan, I won't use the word terminated, but let me remind you, every interview is a test of character. And yesterday, you failed, not as an HR executive, as a human being. Stephanie didn't speak. She rose quietly, gathering her things with trembling hands. She remained seated. No designer label on her blazer, no flashy jewelry, but in that moment, she radiated something no one could deny worth. Linda looked to Gregory. I propose we appoint Brianna Walker as Director of Global Culture Strategy. A board member whispered, Is she ready for that? She's so young. Gregory cut in before anyone else could. He walked over, placed a hand on Brianna's shoulder light, but firm. She's had enough time. Time to be silent. Time to be underestimated. Time to be laughed at while she stood in pain. Now it's time others learn to listen. One young attorney in the room broke the silence. Wait, is she your daughter? Gregory looked him dead in the eye, measuring not the question, but the motive behind it. Yes, he said plainly. But if I'm admitting that now, it's not to shield her, it's to force you to answer one simple question. If she weren't my daughter, would you still believe she deserved this? No one answered. She stood, faced the board. No bitterness, just the voice of someone who finally had the space to speak. I didn't come here to be pitied. I didn't need to be accepted. I just needed to be respected. And yesterday you failed at that. She nodded once to Linda, then turned to leave. No applause, no validation needed. But when the doors closed behind her, something shifted. Not just in the company, but in the hearts of the very people who once dismissed her, as they quietly began to question themselves.